Morning, everyone. My name's Lauren. I'm from Wushu Studios. Here's a bit of an intro about who I am and what I do. Essentially, I do talent acquisition at Wushu, which means recruitment. I've got a decade of experience across HR and recruitment in various industries, with the last 3.5 years at Wushu in games. And then just some other stuff that I'm involved with and awards that I was nominated for this year. If you did want to connect with me on LinkedIn, that QR code should take you there to connect and be in my network. So I'll do a bit of an intro to Wushu Studios, who we are and what we do. If you might not have heard of us, that's absolutely fine. We're what's known as a co-development studio. And what that means is we don't work on our own games, but other studios will come to us and essentially we do work for hire. So they'll get us to work on their games for them. I'll go through some of the games that we've worked on shortly. They usually are AAA sort of pretty well-known games. We've got a multidisciplinary team as well, so we cover all aspects of game development. So everything from programming, animation, VFX, art, QA, you name it. And we are part of Keyword Studios as of last year. That's us. Some of the titles that we've worked on that you may or may not have heard of. We did some work on Baldur's Gate 3, The Ascent, Destruction All-Stars, Fall Guys, Forza, State of Decay 2, and 3 is currently in development. Tail end of last year, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, Sniper Elite Resistance that came out earlier this year, and we've been doing some updates for Helldivers 2 as well. So I'm going to cover off some employability skills today. A lot of this is quite general. I'd say the only thing that's more tailored towards games would be the portfolio aspect, but a lot of this could apply to any industry, really sort of best practice for what I'd recommend. So what makes a good CV? I'd probably need to preface this with every recruiter will tell you something different, which isn't always super useful. It's pretty subjective in terms of what people are looking for, but I would like to say, I've worked in several different industries. I worked in retail, worked in a legal sector, worked in tech and games. So I'd say these are sort of general advice for what makes a good CV in any industry. We're looking for a clear and concise document. Can we read it? Can we find what we need to find? Is it, preferably sort of 1 to 2 pages is fine. Obviously, if you've got a lot of experience that you feel like you can't fit on 2 pages, it's fine. There's not really a rule, but I have seen CVs that were, 20 pages, which is definitely too long. So there's definitely a sweet spot. And being concise it always helps. And just giving us the information that we need without sort of waffling on. Making sure that it is informative, it is telling us what we need to know. Really looking for hard skills, especially in games. We want to know if you've used specific software, if you've used certain engines. It is really important that you list that on there. Don't just take it for granted. We do need to know, and a lot of studios might have specific software that they are sort of married to in terms of licensing. So, and if they don't see it on there, it could be a very quick rejection, unfortunately. Contact information, you would think that this is super obvious. But even now I still get CVs occasionally that don't have an email address or a phone number. It makes it very hard for a recruiter to get in touch with you. And if we can't, then, we'll probably just move on to the next person. Clickable portfolio links. Again, it's just going to save us a lot of time. Sometimes people put sort of the link in, but they don't make it a hyperlink. It's very easy to do. And it just makes it so that we can access your work super quick and just makes it easier for us. Work experience. So I would say it is always relevant. It doesn't matter what industry you are in, what industry you have been in, and what industry you want to go in. There are always transferable skills. So even if you would like to work in the games industry, but maybe you've got, part-time jobs in retail, you've worked in hospitality, etc., I would always recommend putting your experience on your CV because there will be skills in there. There'll be soft skills that are transferable. It just makes you more employable having been employed. So don't fall into that trap of going, oh, I'm not going to put this on there because I don't think it's relevant, because there will be those soft skills that we can ask about. We will ask you about um, things like time management, conflict management, working with a team. Those things are super important, especially at entry level. We're not expecting people to come in with a load of experience, but if you've worked anywhere else, it is going to help. Generally, the rule is that we want to see the most recent stuff on the top in terms of the timeline to the oldest at the bottom. Sometimes people do it the other way around, and it does get really confusing. Sometimes people won't even put the dates in order, which is even more confusing. We kind of want to see a timeline, most recent, scroll down, goes back to sort of previous experience. That just makes sense. If you are struggling to know where to start when it comes to job applications, CVs, don't panic. If you go onto Microsoft Word and click open a new document, one of the first things that comes up in terms of templates is this. It's called Basic Modern CV. It's absolutely fine. There are a bunch of others as well, but this is fine. We don't need a super complicated document. Even in games, I'm not expecting something super creative. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a white document with black text. It's accessible. We can read it. It's got the information we need to know. In terms of showing creativity, that is really what we're expecting your portfolio to reflect. So yeah, don't get too sort of bogged down with, oh, I need to make my CV stand out, because I got asked on a talk earlier this week, which if there are any standout CVs that I remember for being amazing. The answer was no, but I do remember the bad ones. I remember the ones where it wasn't clear, there was too much design, and sometimes I'll cover it later, but sometimes it can cause issues with the applicant tracking software that we use as recruiters as well. So adversely, here's some of the stuff that I don't recommend. So generally, we don't recommend using photos on CVs. There's a lot of unconscious bias that goes on from humans, unfortunately. And just silly example, but if you look like someone that maybe the recruiter went to school with, maybe it was their childhood bully, they've already unconsciously decided that maybe they don't like you because you remind them of someone else. So we generally don't recommend in the UK that you put photos on your CV, just because, there is that unconscious bias. Obviously on LinkedIn, professional headshots are encouraged. If you did want to put one on, it's not the end of the world, but I would generally try and steer away from it and just keep it to sort of factual information and text. Personal information. So this is different to contact information. So when I'm talking about personal information, I'm talking about protected characteristics that fall under the Equality Act. And these are things that are, like I said, protected by law, things that shouldn't be discriminated against, but could be. So we would generally recommend don't include things that don't need to be on there. So even your date of birth is protected information, your age, your gender, your religious beliefs, political ideology. I've seen all those things on CVs. I've seen people put their heights. I've seen people, put their religion. Just don't do it. Generally, it shouldn't need to be on there, and it is potentially problematic if people do just discriminate against you for those things, which they shouldn't be by law, but don't give them the option. Skill ratings have become increasingly popular sort of recently. I think visually it kind of looks cool, but as a recruiter, I think it is a bit of a pet peeve of ours because they don't make sense. So if you're rating yourself 80% on a piece of software, we don't know what that means. It's not quantifiable. You either know how to use it or you don't. So we generally don't recommend that you do this. You either list something or you don't. Don't put those skill ratings. I know it's tempting when you see those graphics and it kind of look fancy, but they don't mean anything. Adjectives without examples and context. So a lot of this comes down to soft skills, and I'll draw more on this shortly. But we are looking for those soft skills and they are super important. But if you're just going to list things like, oh, I'm reliable, I'm punctual, I work well in a team, I work well by myself, great. But without any context, you're not giving examples of how you demonstrate those skills. So you're not really telling us anything. You're just kind of listing out adjectives about how great you think you are and what you think we want to hear, but without tangible examples of those things, without context of situations where you've demonstrated those skills, you're not really giving us any information. Again, going back to the overcomplicated designs, we just don't recommend it. PDF, Word document, the sort of general things that we recommend, and they work well with our systems. You know, that sometimes if you start putting imagery and things on there, it can make the file size too big. It might not be compatible with the system that we're using to store applications. Long lists of irrelevant hobbies. So again, this is a bit of sort of a debating point. Some recruiters say they don't want to see hobbies, and some do. I would say if you're going to put them on there, try and make them relevant in some way. Try and give context as to what skills that might give you, especially in games. If you're interested in games, which I'm assuming a lot of people are, if they want to get in the industry, just writing that you like games again doesn't tell us anything. But if you give us an example of, I really enjoy narrative games, I enjoy the storytelling aspect. Maybe you want to work in narrative, you want to work in game design that helps sort of drive that narrative forward. That is again giving us a little bit more context. It's given us a talking point. It's given us potential questions to ask. It's just given us, it's more informative of just listing, you know, if I like reading, I like films, I like, you know, the things that most people do like. And I'd say if you do something like if you coach under 10 football on a weekend, putting that down is more informative than you just saying, oh, I like football, because you're giving us sort of more context as to sort of, again, more of those soft skills, you know, coaching, mentoring, looking after teams, kind of, you know, collaboration and things like that that we are looking for sort of between the lines. ChatGPT, big one. I'm not saying never use it. The reason I've put an asterisk there is, you know, it's a tool to be used. If you want some help with rewriting a sentence, for example, maybe you're not sure if the tone is too formal or too informal, then absolutely by any means. But if you just straight up copy and paste from it, we can tell every time, especially when it comes to cover letters. I actually disabled cover letters quite recently because we were getting so many from ChatGPT, they just copy and paste. They're exactly the same. Some of the information that it pulls across is inaccurate as well. Sometimes company names either missing or it's incorrect or it references games that we haven't worked on. So just be mindful if you are going to use it as a tool, you still need to use your own critical thinking skills. You need to analyze what it's given you back and don't just straight up copy and paste it. I describe it as sort of the Wikipedia of my generation. When I was at school, there were definitely people that just straight up copied and pasted their essays from Wikipedia, and it's obvious. Like we can tell as soon as you see two identical cover letters, it is very obvious, unless those two people know each other and sat next to each other, that you've used ChatGPT. Portfolio do's and don'ts. So I'm just going to run through these quickly. Obviously, this is quite specific to the games industry. So we would always say to choose a simple website that is easy to navigate. So one of the examples that I had was I was at a university doing sort of CV reviews, portfolio reviews, and a really talented programmer came over to show me their portfolio, but for me to access it, I needed to type in like I was a programmer. I would need to do some sort of code to access their menu and then find things. But I'm not a programmer. And the majority of recruiters and people that you go to at first stages are not actual programmers. Our technical knowledge is lacking normally. We know a little bit about a lot of topics. We know enough about, you know, getting the right people in the door. And then obviously the technical abilities you normally assessed at later stages by hiring managers. So don't, you know, take it for granted that everyone that's going to see your work at first stage is super technically minded and will be able to navigate these things. So have everything that's accessible. Even if you want to try on friends or family that don't have any clue about anything technical, see if they can navigate it and understand it. That's a pretty good benchmark as well. Having your best work only, it is super important to be critical and make sure that you're only showcasing your best work. You're only as strong as your weakest piece that's on your portfolio. So, for example, if you've been studying games, for example, you've got work from first year and then you've got work from your final year, you know, 2 years later, it's safe to say that you can usually assume that work in the sort of third year is going to be better quality, higher standard than in first year. So removing those older pieces, if you do want to go back and sort of revise and sort of update them, absolutely, you can do that and sort of make sure that it's at the standard that you are now and that it reflects the quality that you're demonstrating currently. I think the temptation is sometimes to kind of have a comparison point of where you started and where you finished, but really a portfolio should be your best work. It's saying to the employer, this is what I consistently put out in terms of my standard of work. Another point, especially sort of those entry level, there are a lot of group projects when you've kind of been studying at university or even at college level, which is great because it does replicate that game development environment. It is a very collaborative process. You're in teams, normally with different disciplines. But a lot of the times, if there are group projects, you need to really explain if they were a group, if they were solo projects, if they were a group project, what was your contribution specifically? Because if you don't, and we know that it's a group project by the title or the description, but you haven't explained what role you took and what you did, then we probably can't even consider that as one of your portfolio pieces because it's just unclear who did what, how much was your work, how much was someone else's. So try and be sort of transparent when it comes to that. Including breakdowns is super important. Sometimes people don't do this even at sort of more senior levels. And sometimes it's because they're not allowed to if work is under NDA. But the thing that we're looking for with portfolios, especially when it comes to art, this is more the case, but even design as well. We want to know that you understand the process, that you could replicate the process. Working in games is super reiterative. It's never a one and done. So we need to know that you understand how you got to the end result. Could you do it again? Could you go back and tweak things sort of in the middle? And what do those sort of workflows and pipelines look like? So it isn't just about having sort of those end shiny pieces. It is about that sort of the whole development stage. So on the sort of opposite is making work hard to find or access, like I mentioned, keeping old work that's not reflective of your current level, failure to explain sort of projects or group projects. And an extra one is generally we don't like Google Drive. It's very hard to navigate. It takes us a very long time to get through, even if we have the correct access. That's sometimes an issue. Sometimes we don't have the correct access to get to it and we have to request it, which is all just taking time away from sort of recruiters looking and assessing candidates. And usually we have very high volumes as well, so it is super competitive. So ATS, I've mentioned it a few times. It stands for Applicant Tracking System. What is it? Essentially, it's a piece of software that stores applications and CVs. There's a lot of sort of noise out there on LinkedIn. I think it's moved over to TikTok now as well. People saying that like ATSs, you need to somehow hack the software, beat it. It's all run by AI. A lot of that is sort of massively exaggerated. They aren't super complex pieces of software. There have been some updates, but there isn't a specific way to sort of beat or trick the ATS. Usually there's a human behind it. You're not going to be auto-rejected by AI. The reason I've put an asterisk there is just to explain that when a recruiter or a hiring manager sets up a job, and this has been the case for probably decades, to be honest. I remember doing this back in sort of 10 years ago on Indeed, before we even had an applicant tracking system. You will put in questions to the system about mandatory requirements for the job. Now, some of these are usually things like, if the role is based on site, are you willing to commute to X location 5 days a week? And if you answer no, you will be automatically rejected. Now, that isn't AI. That's based on this is the criteria for the role. People might have put, do you have experience using this software? And if you put no, again, it's going to be a rejection. Now, we have got a bit of a delay on our software, so you wouldn't get an immediate email rejection. But some systems don't have that sort of delay to send emails, or some people haven't set them up. So if you apply and get rejected immediately, it isn't AI. It just means that you've not met the criteria in some way. Maybe you've answered the question wrong. Maybe you don't have the right visa status to work that role as well. But it isn't AI. Sometimes when it comes to layouts, if you've got loads of text boxes or a weird format, it can cause errors when the system tries to parse your information. So what that means is it pulls out bits of information, even like your name. So sometimes we get applications where the thing at the top should usually be your name. And if it isn't, or if it's in a text box, sometimes it can pull your name across as something else that's in the CV. Now we can manually override this and we do correct it, but it can be a bit annoying. So generally, like I said, those sort of Word PDF documents, they're fine. Anything else, it might not upload correctly. If you've got loads of imagery, like I mentioned, the size might not be compatible with the system as well. So yeah, if you've got Word or a PDF, it should be fine. So interviews. So what we would recommend, just sort of a quick prep for interviews is you should Google the company beforehand. I do get a lot of candidates. I appreciate when you're looking for a job, it is super time consuming. You're probably applying to hundreds of jobs. You might not hear back. But if you do hear back, and for us, the first stage would be a call with either myself or our talent acquisition director. We're going to probably ask you, what do you know about us? It's a very simple question. And if you spend a couple of minutes on Google, find out who we are, what we do, what games have we worked on, um, then yeah, you've answered that question fine. If you don't, it kind of says to us, you don't really care, you don't know who we are, you're not bothered, you're not interested. Some other places that you can check for sort of culture related things, like Glassdoor is a great source of that. It's a platform where employees, previous and current employees, can leave anonymous reviews about what they think it is like to work at a place. It could give you some context for what the sort of culture and the vibes like. Is it someone that you're going to enjoy? Are there any sort of red flags there? And you can potentially ask some questions based on things that if you see recurring themes coming up. Company website is usually a great place as well. We've got our values on there. So you can, again, find out a little bit more about the company. Even the benefits and stuff should be on there as well. So you should have all that information, shouldn't need to ask it. LinkedIn, another source, is a great platform for networking and finding jobs, depending on the industry that you're in. But we regularly update there to see, what's been going on in the studio, what have we been working on, and yeah, just more on that sort of what it's like to work there. So interviews, one of the first and most common questions you're going to get asked is tell me about yourself or give me an introduction. And this does catch a lot of people off guard, especially if you're not used to interviewing. You might not have done it before, you might not have done it for a while. So you should really be practicing this question. You can practice it with family or friends, get them to ask you and prepare like a bit of an elevator pitch that should be, I'd say, 1 to 2 minutes max about who you are, what you're interested in, what you want to do for work, why, what you've been doing before. And yeah, try and keep it to that sort of 2 minutes max. I have had people before where we've had to interrupt them because they have talked for about 20 minutes. They've not know when to stop. So yeah, just make sure that you're prepared for this. And this goes for, if you are at networking events, people are going to introduce themselves and ask who you are. So again, it's another opportunity to answer that question and get comfortable answering that question as well. So soft skills are key at first stages of interview. So I'm just going to move that. I couldn't see. There we go. So make sure that you are demonstrating these. So these are things like teamwork, problem solving, conflict resolution. I mentioned some of these earlier. These are key, especially at entry level. These are things that we are assessing for. A lot of that technical ability will come later, or it can be taught. But some of these things kind of need to know that you've got these skills coming in. And we would generally recommend when you are asked a question, so you'll be asked a question like, give me an example of a time you worked well in a team or overcame a problem. So we would recommend that you structure this in the STAR method. So this stands for situation, task, action, and result. So it's just a way for you to give across examples in a structure, a clear structure that makes sense, and sticks to, sort of the facts. Did you have a brief, for example? What was the task in order for you to sort of meet that brief? What did you then do? And what was the result of that? And that again keeps you on track, and to answer those questions with tangible examples. So we would always recommend as well, ask questions, be prepared with some questions at the end of the interview. Here are a couple of common ones. I would recommend as well, though, do stay present in the interview. It is a two-way conversation. So sometimes I get a bit frustrated if I get asked questions at the end just because someone feels like they have to ask. But I've already answered them through the course of the call, but it just says to me that you weren't listening, you weren't really engaged. So try and pay attention, and if things do come up during the course of the interview, if your questions have already been answered, you can say that as well. But yeah, do try and ask something because it just shows that you're interested and that you are engaged. Couple of extra points. I did mention earlier networking, but it is super important. This industry is super competitive and everyone wants to be in it. I think networking is super important to, get in front of the right people, build up that contacts in, different studios, find out who's hiring, where are they based, what do they do, and just making sure that you've kind of got your ear to the ground when those opportunities do become available. There's various events sort of up and down the country. Develop Brighton's sort of a big one. But there's also a lot of online communities as well, Discord groups, interest groups, and then there's like local meetups as well. So again, just trying to find out where those are so that you could get in front of the right people. Taking feedback on board is really important. As I mentioned earlier, games is super iterative sort of process for creation. Sometimes things get scrapped, sometimes things have to change quite a lot. So it's taking that on board, not taking it personally as well. So responding well to constructive criticism, and also I used the example the other day. We had someone apply for a graduate role, and we do get extremely high volumes, and they got quite far into the process to the point of doing a technical test, and we gave them some feedback on what they could have done better. And then the next year they applied, and they had applied what we'd told them the previous year, and they had improved, and it was good to see that. So we do remember, and if you are showing examples of you consistently improving as well, it's only a sort of a green flag for us as an employer. Staying consistent is important as well. Sometimes I think the temptation, especially if you've studied games at university, for example, and then you finish a course, I think the temptation is to kind of, well, that's it now, I'll just look for a job. But if you don't keep up with the tech, it evolves constantly all the time. If you're not continually learning or improving your portfolios, and you've not touched your portfolio in, say, a year, versus someone that's just graduated that is constantly doing that, they're going to have a bit of an edge over you, and you might be a little bit rusty and get left behind. Again, not giving up. It's a competitive industry, and it's not in a great place right now. There are natural peaks and troughs in any industry, and we had a bit of a boom during the pandemic, and we're on a bit of a lull now. But there are also a lot of adjacent industries that are using the similar tech. So just because you're not necessarily working games doesn't mean that you can't do the same tech and then maybe transition later on in. So there are things like a lot of design work. Interior design uses some of the same design software that we use for games. Advertising, obviously film and TV, animation. There are a lot of different sort of segues. Marketing is starting to use sort of the same softwares. Again, design-wise, there's a lot of crossover. So there are other opportunities there as well. And yeah, I think, May, did you say that there is time for questions if anyone's got any?